Hi everybody, welcome to Mr. Natural's Music School here in California, sunny California. We're in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. Please look us up when you're in the area. First thing I'd like to do is do a promo for my book called Music Theory Decoded Strictly by the Numbers. What we're going to do is start teaching you how to read music on the staff by number using the method that I've developed for reading music, and this book is a great help. Inside here you'll find a device here called the Intervalometer. Also, we have a posting of the Intervalometer online that will be in the description below a little bit later on this evening. And what this is this is a PDF printout. And if you go to load this PDF and then send it to a color printer, on one side of the paper, use some heavier stock, you'll get this, which is the major scale. And those blue notes there are literally the blues notes, the flat 3, flat 7, flat 5 of the major scale, which are used for playing the blues. And on the other side, registered beautifully, is this little red slider, which is the minor scale. And using the red 6 and red 7 going up, you have the melodic minor. Using just the red 7 going up in the numbers, you have what's called a harmonic minor, and just using just the numbers by themselves, you have the natural minor scale. So right here you have a visualization of both the major scale and the blues scale and the three different minor scales that are used for learning to do just about anything you want to do in music. You can get this PDF and print it out to your printer. It's absolutely free. You cut it up, and when you cut it up, it makes a nice little strip. What I did is I cut it up and used paper clips to paper clip it together like this, see, into a nice long strip. And what happens is this long strip, there's your minor scale side, here's your major scale side. This fits behind the black keys on your piano and sits up, and it slides around, which is why the intervalometer is called the slider by all the kids in school. And the slider moves around, and you just get the number 1 here, and get the number 1 to point at whatever key you want to play, say the key of C, and you will find out that all the numbers will line up with all the white keys on the piano and visually show you the key of C. So this is a tool, and it's kind of like a ruler for music. It allows you to see the size of the intervals. In my theory book here, we explain how to use that intervalometer and that concept to know everything there is to know about music. Book's not that thick. It's only about 80 pages and covers everything. You'll cover if you go to music school and you spend 2 to 4 years trying to get your PhD. This will help simplify the problem. So today what we're going to do is start out learning a method of reading music on the staff by number. And the first thing I want to do is show you a blank staff. Now the blank staff is said to have 5 lines and 4 spaces. Not true. There are 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, correct. But if we consider the space below and the space above as spaces, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. 5 lines and 6 spaces. Here, 5 lines, a space below, and a space above. Same here, 5 lines, space below, space above, 6 spaces. That allows us to notate 11 notes on a staff. Now in reading my music, the only thing you need to do is learn to play a major scale and number it. So let's say we're going to be playing in the key of C on the piano. So we would align this strip up so that the number 1 here is on the C, and you can see that the numbers all align with the notes on the keyboard, the white notes on the keyboard, and you'll see that the stripes now align with the stripes, or the black keys on the keyboard. And this gives you the numbers for the key of C. The key of C, C is the number 1. The next step in C is the number 2, which is D. The number 3 then becomes E. The number 4 is F, and you'll see 3 and 4 are right next to each other with no black space. Then you have 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, and again 7 to 1, again a high one, or from do to do is also has no little half space in there. So if we want to read in another key, for instance like the key of D, D has sharps in it. So I'd move it over and move it down so it exposes the sharps. And then what I can do is see that the number 1 is D. The second note in the D scale would be E. And then you see here on F, the number 3 is up here on the sharp. So F sharp would be in the D scale. Then the number 4 aligns with G. The number 5 aligns with A. The number 6 aligns with the B. And then again, you see there's a stripe there. So we have to go to the number 7. And the 7th step of the D scale is another sharp, and it's C sharp. So you can see the number 3 is an F sharp, and the number 7 is a C sharp. And there are indeed in the D scale 2 sharps. Now, once you know this, you can forget about those sharps because they're going to be globally affected. And all I need to do is play the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 to start playing simple songs. And that's what the intervalometer does. It allows you to move around and visually see the scales, the major scale, in all the different positions on the keyboard, and all you have to do is focus on the numbers. So the first thing is, you have to learn to play a major scale. You have to be able to play on any instrument a major scale at least 1 octave, starting on a low note. So on the trumpet, the C on the trumpet on a meter shows up as B flat. So when a trumpet player is playing what he thinks is his C scale, he's actually sounding the B flat scale. And since the B flat scale is difficult to teach people to start learning to read using the ABC system, they avoid it, and instead of teaching people, hey, you're in the key of B flat, which has 2 flats in it, blah, 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 they don't do that. They start with the key of C because using the ABC system, the key of C is the easiest one to learn because it has no sharps or flats. And we can introduce the accidentals one at a time. We then move them over into the key of G, where there's a single sharp, and later into the key of F, where there's a single flat. So that's why that system is done. Now on the alto saxophone, which is in E flat, when they're playing their C scale, when they're playing C and going C, D, E, F, G, up and down, they're actually sounding on a meter. If you put a digital meter on there, you will see that what they're sounding, the sound that's coming out of the horn now, is actually E flat, because the horn's cut to E flat. So again, they're taught to read C, but the horn itself is sounding the E flat scale. Now, it doesn't matter with the ABC game what scale you're playing, as long as you know what your starting note is on a digital meter. So whatever instrument you might have, you have a clarinet, you pick it up, you play C on your clarinet, and you look on the digital meter and you see it says A sharp or B flat on the digital meter, that's the scale that you're playing. If you grab a flute and hold the note G and play it on the digital meter, it will show a G. So on the flute, the key of G and the fingering pattern for the key of G happens to be, in concert pitch, the key of G. So you'll find that in horns, trumpets, trombones, baritone, euphonium, cornet, euphoniums, your French horns, your mellophones, your tuba, your baritone, all those horns are in different keys. And most of them are actually sounding the key of B flat while they're reading on the staff the key of C. And that's one of the reasons why their music needs to be transcribed into a different key to go along with the rest of the people in the orchestra that are playing in concert pitch, C. Woodwinds have similar problems. The flute is in C, the oboe is in C, the bassoon is in the key of C. So if you play a C scale on those instruments, you're actually sounding a C scale. But if you go to the saxophones, the tenor saxophone and the soprano saxophone are in B flat. The clarinet is in B flat. And so those woodwinds would not be sounding the note that they're reading, that they've learned to read. So when they learn to read in the key of C on the tenor sax, you're playing B flat. On the soprano sax, you would be playing the key of B flat. On an alto sax, which is in the key of E flat, your C scale would be playing E flat. And this is why woodwinds and horns in particular cannot read piano music and play along with the piano, because they would have to translate into another key. And all you need to do to play in another key is figure out a new fingering pattern. So if I'm going to play the clarinet, all right, there's a fingering pattern that would generate that C scale that they think is C, which is actually the B flat scale in concert pitch. And on the saxophone, the same thing. I would be reading the same C scale on my script, but I'd be playing in the key of E flat. So whatever is on your meter, whatever shows up on your digital meter, that's what you're actually sounding, okay? So if you're playing trumpet, the C scale, you're actually sounding B flat. If you're playing the tuba, it's B flat. If you're playing the trombone, now the trombone, if they teach people to read with the treble clef on the trombone, they have the same problem, that the C that they're reading is actually B flat on the horn. However, trombones were the first instrument, the first brass instrument to break out into concert pitch, and they started teaching people how to read the bass clef. And when they taught them to read the bass clef, they taught them to read B flat on the bass clef. So when trombone players play the bass clef, they are playing in concert pitch. So if they're playing C, it's C. If they're playing B flat, it's B flat, okay? So the first thing is you need to have a scale. Now let's say I'm playing an instrument that is unconventional, like a bamboo flute, for instance, or a cane flute that you buy. Well, if you close all the holes on the flute and blow the first note, let's say that that's your do, or 1. You measure that with a digital meter, and you find out what that note is. Let's say I do that and it's G. Then when I pick one finger up, it should go from G to A. And if I pick the next finger up, it should go from A to B. And if it does that, and as you pick your fingers up one at a time, it plays the major scale. And if you put them back down, it plays the major scale. Some bamboo flutes and some cane flutes are not cut to have the normal major scale from the lowest hole to the highest hole. Some of them are cut in minor. So they're actually, when the whole thing is closed, what's happening is, as you raise your fingers one at a time, you'd be on the other side of our slider, the red slider. And you'd be playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 would be the minor scale. What you need to do in that case is start playing with the third hole. You lift one finger up, lift up another finger, so you're on the third hole, and that would give you your do in major. And if you move your fingers up and back down, you should be going do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do in major. So you can learn to play the major scale on a minor flute. Now some bamboo flutes are cut to only have a 5-note scale. They don't have 6 holes. They only have 4 holes or 5 holes. And they usually, the 4-hole flutes are usually playing a pentatonic, which is usually either a major pentatonic, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and they don't have a 4 or a 7. Or they're playing the minor pentatonic, which is going 1, 4, 5, 7 flat, 1, 3 flat, 4, 5, 7 flat 1. And in that case, it's a little bit harder to figure out exactly where the major scale, you can't play a major scale essentially on a minor pentatonic flute, okay? It's hard to do. So you'd have to skip that instrument. If you run across the koto or you run across the violin and you start sliding your fingers around and you learn to noodle out on one of the strings, let's say on the violin I'm playing the D string, and I learned to noodle out do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do between the 2 strings, then I'm playing the D major scale. So the first thing is you need a major scale. Second thing is, let's look at what happens on the staff if we start regarding it from the point of view of numbers. The first thing in this system is we have these things called clefs. We have our treble clef, which actually is the letter G. We have our bass clef, which is actually the letter F. See, if you join those dots together, the letter F. And then we have our, it's called transposition clef, or the tenor clef, or the alto clef, which is telling us here that this equals the letter C. Now in our system, these don't matter because they were a way in the early days to teach people which one of these lines would start as the number one, or do in those days. They call it do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which is just a Latin way of saying first verse, second verse, third verse, fourth verse. They were the first syllables of a prayer. And the first prayer started with Dominis, I don't know, Dominis Nabisco shredded wheat. Whoops, I just had a light go out. And so we have no idea exactly what scale those things were in. So, but we don't need them. We don't need clefs at all, okay? The next thing is we have these things called the key signature, where they start with an F sharp, and then they have, with the treble clef, for instance, then you have a C sharp, then they put a G sharp, then they put a D sharp, etc. Well, in the case of these clefs, these key signatures, all that happens is the rightmost sharp is always going to be the number 7. And as we're putting flats down here, the rightmost flat always equals the number 4. Now, once I know where the number 7 or the number 4 are at, I can figure out where 1 is at. And again, this globally is sending out sharps and flats throughout the whole piece. So that means because they're global, we can ignore them. So here we are in the key of nothing by numbers. And let's see what happens when we start doing these number patterns, okay? The first thing is, if I were to take this bottom line and start numbering it, this would be the number 1. Then over here, I'd have the number 2. Then this next line above is going to be the number 3. Then this space is going to be the number 4. This line would be the number 5. This space would be the number 6. Then this line would be the number 7. Then that space is the number 1. And then this is 2 and 3. And if we start adding ledger lines, that would be 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So we're going line, space, line, space, line, space. Looks like both of our lights have given up on us. I forgot to charge the batteries. My fault. So we'll see what happens to this video. All right, so all we're doing is this pattern. Now, if I were to start this, let's say, on this line here, that would be 1. And then what happens is, let's see what happens when we separate the lines and spaces. This is the number 2. This next line would be the number 3. This space would be the number 4. This line here is going to be the number 5. And this line is going to be the number 6. And this line is going to be the number 7. And this space then becomes 1. And then what happens is the first ledger line here, this space, this line becomes the number 2. And then what happens is the space above that is 3. And then we have 2 ledger lines. And again, the line becomes the number 4. And then what happens is we then have the space 5, etc., etc. And going backwards, there's a 1 here. There would be on this space a 7. On this line, there would be a 6. And on this space below, there would be a 5. Now, I think there's enough of a pattern here. If we look at the red and the black, you'll notice a pattern begins to appear. For instance, if I only look at the lines, I have 6, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. All the lines wind up being this pattern, 1, 3, 5, 7, first 4 odd numbers, and then in succession, the even numbers. You'll also notice that down here, we have on this space that space and that space, 2, 4, 6, the even numbers. And then it goes 1, 3, 5, 7 again. So what's happening is a pattern is beginning to form. And this pattern is what I refer to as the universal decoding, or known as the circle of thirds. So here's the pattern. 1, 3, 5, 7, then 2, 4, 6, and then it starts all over again. 1, 3, 5. Now, a nice way to visualize this as if it is in a circle. So if I start with the number 1 here, and then put 3 here, and 5 over here, and then 7 here, and then 2, and then 4, and then 6, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. This becomes our magic decoder wheel.
Jacob Thomas says hello.
Hi Jacob, welcome. So this 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6 pattern, it turns out, is what naturally happens if I were to start labeling 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1. If I start labeling just the lines, I get this pattern 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, back to 1. If, however, I were to start doing, say, the spaces from the very bottom here, let's make the bottom space 1, then the next space is going to be 3, the next is going to be 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1. 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1. So you see the spaces, if I use this as my 1, would have the same pattern as the lines if I did 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1. Now that's important. Spaces or the lines are going to generate this pattern. What else does this pattern generate? Well, it turns out that when we like to write chords, the chords in what we call the root position are always 3 notes, one on top of the other, or they're 4 notes, one on top of the other. Now, when the kids draw these, they call this snowmen. Okay? You can see why they call that the snowmen, right? And so that kind of a chord, the kids look at that and say, oh, that's a snowman, and it's always one on top of the other. If we have a 4-note chord, it's one on top of the other. If I were to start here at the bottom of these notes and say this is the number 1, then 2 is the space, 3 would be the next one, 4, 5 would be the next one, and this chord, called a 1 chord, would be expressed as the number code 1, 3, 5, and since it starts on a line, it would all be on lines. If I wanted to make a chord that was larger than that, add what we call the 7th to the chord, I just add another note, and it's 1, 3, 5, 7. And you can see that it's just all the lines. However, if we decide to start playing this game with spaces, and I go that, that, and we make this one, then this is 1, 3, 5, and if I add another note, 7. Same thing happens, except it happens on all spaces. So knowing that this pattern happens for creating chords, an interesting thing comes up. Let's say we're only doing 3-note chords. If I want to make a 1 chord, it would be spelled 1, 3, 5. If I want to make a 2-note chord, it would be spelled 2, 4, 6. Now if 1, 3, 5 are on lines, 2, 4, 6 is going to be on spaces. And if 1, 3, 5 happens to be on spaces, then 2, 4, 6 will be on lines. So the opposite end of this is always going to be, this is lines, that'll be spaces. This is spaces, that'll be lines. Now the reason for this is if we look in between here, in between the 2 and the 7 is a 1. In between the 2 and 4 is 3. In between 4 and 6 is 5. Between 6 and 1 is 7. Between 7 and 3 is 2. Between 3 and 5 is 4. between 5 and 7 is 6. And if you look at the black lines now, you'll see they're going 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. It's the exact same pattern. If these are all lines, then these black ones would be all on spaces. Right? If these red ones are on spaces, then the black ones would be on line. And you'll notice that the one here is exactly opposite the one there. So if this is a line, the next one, when we go up an octave, is going to be on a space. So we're only going to study it melodically within one measure to start with. But later, one octave. But if we go over 2 octaves to try to spell chords, what happens is it takes 2 octaves for this pattern to come around. 1 to 1 here is 1 octave, then from the space 1 all the way back through to the line 1 would be the next octave. It takes 2 of these octaves to produce chords. So chords or harmony are always done over a 2 octave bandwidth, and melodies are always thought of as a 1 octave bandwidth. Now in melodies we have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then it starts over again. 1, it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do means first verse, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do means first verse again. So what I like to do is, if I have a normal number 1, I just write down the number 1. If I have a number 1 that's an octave higher than that, I put down the number 1 and put a little line over the top of it. And if I want to produce the 1 an octave below this, I put the number 1 and draw a line underneath it. What happens is, by designating the numbers normal with a line over them or under them, I have here a 3 octave bandwidth, which is bigger than most instruments. I think the saxophone has 2.5 octaves total. The clarinet has a little bit more, almost 3 octaves. I think the guitar has 3.5 octaves maximum. So if you can write something within 3 octaves, you can cover the bandwidth, the range of almost every instrument there is in the orchestra in order to begin to read. And this is the system we're going to start to use. So this is just the basics. The most important thing is to memorize this pattern. 1, 3, 5, 7, 4 odd numbers, then 2, 4, 6, 3 even numbers. And what we're going to learn to do starting next week is learning to take these numbers and place them on the staff in different places. So here's some homework for you to do. If I were to start on this line with that as 1, how would the lines and how would the spaces be numbered separately? If I started here with the number 1, what would the numbers be going underneath and going above? And if I started the number 1 here. So here we're starting on the bottom line, here we're starting on the second line from the bottom, and here we're starting in the middle. And the thing is to take this pattern, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, and if that's on a line, which these all are, then just start laying out line, 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 until you come back, okay? And using ledger lines above or below, just extend it beyond the 11-note possibility that the staff has. This is all we need to do to start reading.
And if you want to go down, go the other way around the circle.
Yes, so what Angel's saying is if we want to go down the staff, we rotate in the other direction. So let's say my 1 is up here, right there. Then the next line down is going to be 6. The next line will be 4. The next line will be 2. And right here, that would be where 1 is. So if 1 is up here on this line, the 1 below is going to wind up on a space. And if I take this down, space, 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 way down here somewhere, we're going to wind up right back on the line with the number 1. 1, 6, 4, 2, and then we'll be right back there on the line. Okay? So experiment with this and see what happens if I number this 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 1, 3, 5, 7, going backwards, 1, 6, I'm rotating up, 1, 3, 5, rotating down, 1, 6, 4, 2, etc. And what you have to do in this case is only label just the lines, because 1 is starting on a line. All you need to do is label all the lines. Now, what happens when you read music, as far as the sharps and flats are concerned, since the key signature is global, that means those number of sharps or flats are necessary to create the major scale. So if you get a major scale, right, you could just see those numbers as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you don't have to worry about which ones are sharps and which ones are flats. It won't matter as you're reading the music. Now what happens is, as they're writing the music, a 1 sharp or a 4 sharp might come up in the music. And when you see a sharp on that note, you then modify that up a half a step. If you see something like a 7 flat or a 3 flat on the music in front of those numbers, then what that means is you're going to go down a half a step. So if this is 1, 2, 3, 3 flat would be E flat. If I'm in the key of G and I go to 3, then the 3 flat would be B flat. All right. If I have a 4 sharp, 1, 2, 3, 4, up 1 chromatic tone to the F sharp would be the 4 sharp. And those only happen within that measure, and they only last for that measure. You only have to notate it once within that measure, and just have to put a sharp in front of the F, and then all the Fs in that measure will be an F sharp. By the way, the Fs an octave below and the Fs an octave above will not be sharped. If the F above or the F below, the one that has the sharp in front of it, doesn't have a sharp on it, then those are natural. Those are not sharped. The sharps and flats, or the accidentals, will only show up on the note that they want to modify within that measure, and it only lasts for that measure. And when you cross the measure boundary, when you go past that bar line, everything is reset. It's all off. So if you see the number, say 1 sharp in a measure, and that note comes up 3 times in that measure, you'll play the 1 sharp 3 times in that measure. But when you cross the boundary, if you see the 1 again, it would be a normal 1. It would not have a sharp on it. And so because of that, the neutral sign becomes special kind of character and needs to be handled a certain way, which we'll explain in the future. So that's it for the beginning of this. It all starts with being able to simply enumerate the staff, starting from any line or any space, using the magic circle, okay? The quicker you can remember that magic circle, now the key to it is learning it backwards. Going 1, 6, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3. Why? 1, going down the scale is harder. People can't do the ABCs backwards, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. They can't do that easily, and you have to be able to go, G, F, C, A. You have to be able to read down that fast. Sometimes you go, boom, right? So you haven't got time to go G, F, E, D, and figure out the alphabet. Here, same thing. I don't have time to figure this out, so I have to make it intuitive. So I have to study and get this pattern, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, which is easy for most people. 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7 is hard. Another thing this is good for is I might not start building my chord on the root of the chord. For instance, I might want to start building the root on the 5th note. So I need to know how to spell 1 chord backwards. Well, it's going to be 5, 3, 1. So learning this pattern backwards, going down, is a really good thing, because a lot of people learn to arpeggiate going up the chords. And if you do that numerically, it's pretty simple. But then coming backwards, you need to be able to spell the chord backwards. And a lot of people, even when they do the ABCs, they'll spell GBD, and they can't say DBG. All right? They learn things forward in one direction, always going up, and they don't learn to do it backwards. So remember, this circle can rotate forward or backwards. If it rotates clockwise, it's going up the scale, and if it rotates counterclockwise, it's coming down the scale. That's it for this week. We'll go on a little bit more. You will also find in my playlist, there's a thing down there that says visual training for your eye. The visual training for your eye are 36 or 39 small 1 to 2 minute videos. And what they do is they teach you how to read and see these intervals. So it stops being a left brain process and becomes a right brain process. And instead of trying to think about what the interval size is, you learn to feel it intuitively and say it like this, so it becomes subconscious and automatic. So please do that training, and you'll find out that even if you're a die-hard ABC guy, that visual training is going to help you learn to read music quite a bit. So until next week, thank you very, very much. We'll see you then. Have a good week. Next Thursday, 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. And maybe we'll keep the lights on next time.